Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 4 with Black Ice, and of course we're playing as Japan this series, Land of the Rising Sun. Okay, so getting near the end of 1936. And we have another free military factory. And look here. Trucks. Heavy machine gun teams. Cavalry equipment. We're not producing any cavalry equipment, so let's go cavalry equipment and then more heavy machine guns. Producing a couple of steel factories because I think we will be needing those. Now we've got most all of the sort of pre-war, most all of their pre-war stuff produced. Got destroyers, we got a carrier in production. Let's look at light cruisers. Mechanical computing, good, and we got some good bonuses there, so wait on those. In about 6 days or so. 7 days out. There we go. Okay, state laboratories. That's excellent. Now, gone down that. Now, warrior tradition, 35 days, 35 days student movement, imperial austerity. And this will we can improve our government. Okay, we've gotten 2 good industrial people there. Thanks, Arno. Just wasn't sure, because I know wanted to make sure everyone was able to get the stream. Mitsubishi. They're probably the best choice here. Liability, build time. But the other fighter types. But the 0 is a Mitsubishi. That is the. I'm gonna read down through all of this. Isn't it the A6M? Yeah, so. Why am I not seeing it on the list? Oh, we'll do that anyways. Carrier primacy, good. We'll do infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. That is what ultimately doomed Japan, was the lack of production ability. They could just not even come close to the US. So we got a destroyer class and a light cruiser class in production. On Infinity, we got, well, let's just go for 1 here of the carrier class, because we may want to see when that's done if we want to go to a different, better carrier class. And we got 1 left of these heavy cruisers now. Fast battleship or big battleship. Let's go with a big battleship. Start this out. Just one of them. Once that gets done, it'll transfer factories over to that. Or shipyards, I should say. Warrior traditions, great. Doctrine or imperial austerity. Use the need for consumer goods. Let's add a maxed out there, so let's put a shipyard here. And put a light aircraft factory there. And a small arms aircraft factory down there. So, see what's going on in Spain. Black Ice, as you may be aware, in Hearts of Iron 4, they have a bunch of, I don't know, events, whatever, that spawn partisans around to keep this war going longer. So, once they start getting into this condition, then nationalist Spain seems to move its troops up to the front, and then there's a partisan spawn, so that's they're doing to keep that alive longer. Grand battle plan. Good. Of course, we have a bunch of divisions that are not assigned to anybody because I don't really care yet. That looks like a good option. Yeah. So we've got one carrier now, one battleship. Basically just one. So is do transport ships. Check those out. Who with? Yeah, okay, we'll do a small arms deal with the German Reich. I want a reasonably motorized army, so let's produce a few more trucks. Oh, it really helped. 5 more IC for building. And of course, let's do that. Aircraft factory. The Hindenburg disaster. Okay. I don't say good. No, but trained army command, nice, and truck workshops and artillery workshops. Really wonder if we'll be able to invade the U.S. Sort of my goal. Before that, maybe take Australia and New Zealand, but Paris Universal Exhibition. We can see and cover those in more detail for European base. Games. We can maintain our tools better. That's nice. We can do this. Train our workforce better. Yard level 8 reach. Again. Okay, we'll address this. Amelia Earhart. Recently, you may have seen, made the general news, that they suspected that they had a photo of her after her supposed death on one of these islands out here. Doesn't really matter where. They may even out in the middle of the ocean. Picture of her and Fred Noonan from the back, and possibly her airplane on the float behind a ship. Well, I looked into this, and I got very interested in to find out about what was going on. So I found an actual online a copy of the photograph in a book, and it doesn't really matter. But it was like the book was published, if all the markings in the book are correct, 2 years before she went missing. So it definitely looked like shall we say, a back of an androgynous European. You sort of saw semi-profile from the back. Could have been her with short hair. She didn't have blue hair. I don't know. This crappy. I know you probably get tired of me going on about the colorization, but this crappy colorization just makes me sick. And the body type for the other male was definitely a European, and definitely could be Fred Noonan, as they talk about in here. You know, could have been him, but it wasn't, because, like I say, it was 2 years before, and the metal thing that looked like it was on a barge. Don't know if it was an aircraft or not, but it wasn't them. So I don't think the Japanese killed her. I think she crashed somewhere. Whether she crashed in the ocean or on an island, I don't know. She was not that good of a pilot. I can say this pretty categorically because she cracked up a lot on landings, and had her aircraft worked on a lot. Not necessarily, and cracked up, had a hard landing, shall we say, in like one of the, landing gear, the wheels on one side or something would collapse or whatever. And not like her airplane would crash and burn, but it would be damaged and need to be repaired. And did that a lot. And in a lot of times in what was otherwise good conditions. So how many? Oh, we got a bunch more. Oh, the carrier's done. So that's what I sort of yeah, let's do another one of these guys. Look at it. So it wasn't that she was cracking up or hard landings or whatever in like rainstorms or leadership purges in the Soviet Union. Yes, just what you need to do: destroy the leadership of your country. So that's why I say she was a not that good of a pilot. I'm not saying she was terrible or anything, because if you look at the time period and the amount of flying she was doing a lot, and so it's not like she was having a horrendous Fortress Japan. We don't need that yet. Industrial research effort, industry. How many days? 70 days. We just do one first. That extra research. So, you fly enough, you're going to have some hard landings, most assuredly, but so she wasn't any great aviator. She was just one of the very early women aviators. So that, she's pioneering in that sense. There was a lot of sexism. Some of it may be deserved. So you got to, as I'm saying this, what some people might want to jump on me on YouTube or something. how do I put this? Not everybody has the same interests. Okay. I can anecdotally talk about some of this stuff, but there are, it's not that women aren't capable of being a good pilots. Of course they are. And some of the best pilots in World War II were women. But they weren't necessarily combat pilots. The Soviets did have combat pilots. I think they're the only nation that routinely had large numbers of combat pilots that were women. But like in Britain, there were huge numbers of women that were ferrying pilots, and they were probably in many ways better than a lot of the male pilots because they ferried all kinds of aircraft. They'd fly a fighter one day, a bomber the next day, a transport, and you're just ferrying around aircraft around Britain. At times, because there were German raids, they sort of, had to avoid and deal with combat. And that most assuredly was a real thing. But there is also the situation that a lot fewer, a percentage I would say, of women in the 30s and 40s really wanted to be pilots. That doesn't necessarily mean, not everyone who's skilled to be a pilot wants to be a pilot. Just because of, shall we say, cultural issues. Then more so than today, but even today, a lot more women want to be at home raising children. They want that. Now, they might be a great race car driver or a great pilot if they were trained for it, but that's not their area of interest. So, when you talk about in the early days, you get some women that, shall we say, are enthusiastic and don't necessarily do a good job. So then, the men around them start thinking that women must not do a good job. And so sometimes it's more hope over reality is sort of, I guess, what I want to say about that. So it's not that women aren't capable of being pilots or something. It's nothing like that. It's just at times they try to get good examples more rapidly, shall we say, than there's enough that are desiring to be good examples, that are capable of it. And, it's, how do I put this? It's also sort of a cultural thing, I think, that we need to understand with people. It's not women. I'm just talking people. Big changes in society and, shall we say, problem-solving aspects and a lot of that other kinds of things don't always come naturally. I'm not talking necessarily in general classes or in to individuals, but you're shifting roles in the first half of the 20th century in sort of two important ways, and it's something that I've looked at a little bit, is you're moving definitely from a agrarian society, which has very little manufactured goods. You're really moving from there into a manufactured society with lots of pre-made goods. How many of you today start with a live chicken and have that chicken for dinner? And how many of you have ever started that way? A few probably could say yes, but that's going to be a rare thing. So you have the situation where men and women were making their food in a agrarian society, from truly from scratch. The wheat grains needed to be ground into flour. The chicken needed to be killed. Probably something like a cow or a steer might much more be slaughtered on a butcher shop just because it's so large. But a lot of that, so a lot of that changed. The people changed into, over a few generations, into buying things at the store. So a lot of skill sets were lost, and a lot of problem-solving skill sets were lost. And then, after you've done that, changeover, or as you're going through it, depends on what country you're talking about. You're then changing the roles of not just women, but men as well in society. Because if you look at early industrial society, and this is very much applies at this time in Japan, but applies at other things. Early industrial jobs are sort of, you get trained, you know how to do this job. It's not necessarily you know how to do every job in the factory. And so it's that to then needing to move from that to a more dynamic situation where you want to do development of industry and not just do the same old thing. And so you get a lot of this transition stuff. And this is why I understand, shall we say, people's perceptions at the time about women in the workplace. And so if you ever are talking about major changes in society, okay, those are all good. I'm just looking to see if we want to change here with any of these right off. Okay, so we are, okay, that's a pretty good bracket. See, now here we have, they're not allowed. So we, recruitable population gets larger, consumer good factories get smaller, political power gain reduces, national unity reduces. But I think we want to do that. So let's do women allowed in factories. And, oh, women were allowed in factories in Japan. Most assuredly. But, and I don't know this in detail, but I do think to some degree the roles were limited. I don't know how much of that. I say this, and I know this to be fact because I've seen photographs of it. How much of that is wartime effort versus civilian effort? Because they had a lot of child labor during the war, and they probably had I don't think they had good child labor laws, so they probably had a lot of that anyways. But some of that is culturally understood by people in the idea of agrarian, again, societies in which children work on the farm versus working in a factory. But there were a lot of schools turned over to various war-related projects in which the students, instead of going to class every day, built things for the war in their schools. So they were doing that as well. But I think that, particularly that, was more of a war measures as opposed to pre-war society. Student movement. We want that extra research slot. size average. Good. They're slowly growing here. How are we doing with? We need more naval fighters, but we're building those. That's good. Bringing that up, which means we can build. Let's build one of these. I was going to see about what do these look like. Well, those are pretty decent divisions. Let's train one of those. Oh. You sort of have to watch these things here. Oh, great typhoon. You want to deploy those and deploy them with less. They needed some more equipment, but just deploy the damn thing. They'll get their equipment. Time. Transport vehicles, armored cars. So let's increase that. And these regular trucks here. When we get some of the new factories up and going. There we go. Extra research slot now. Synthetic oil focus, industrial effort. Got this here. $37. I think we can now do, yes, my favorite, the flying boat. Flying boats are cool. Well, particularly really cool. Flying boats are sort of cool. Very cool is amphibians. Flying boats with landing gear. That's super cool. That means you can go almost anywhere. Or you can land almost anywhere, I should say. The Anti-Comintern Pact. Germany proposes that we sign a pact recognizing the aim of the Communist International, known as the Comintern, is to disintegrate and subdue existing states by all the means at its command, and convince that the toleration of interference by the Communist International in the internal affairs of nations not only endangers the international peace and the social well-being, but also a menace to the peace of the world, desirous of cooperating in the defense against communist subversive activities. Yes, and it's quite true that's what they were trying to do, so we will join this. Okay, and I think we want to do operational integrity. Yeah, because I'm not that interested, I don't think, in strategic destruction via air. Or maybe battlefield support. That's the German tract, I know, but... Anybody got any particular opinions? I like that fighter superiority, fighter detection. Yeah, let's do. The Navy would like to continue down a doctrine, I'm sure. Okay. Anglo-Irish trade war ends. Okay, Southern Expansion Doctrine. Destroyer, expand truck lagoon. Naval dockyard, that's very good. That would be good too, but let's first get the dockyards. Okay, so we've gotten through the first big battleship. Let's build another one. And we still have one more, so we will up. Oh, two more. Transports. Build lots of them. Their map could use work, I think, but it's good. Oh, good. We're gonna wait for 38 to do some more research there. Well, we are doing that, so let's wait on that for this. I think that's really what I'm come over here. Finish that one, and then we're going to think one of these are the big sort of carrier type, I think. I am far from an expert on Japanese subtypes. Well, we'll wait a little bit and get that. Don't know if a faster game is better. I know that somehow it was designed this way, but I'm looking to see down here. Okay, so we have one tank. We could use some munitions factories and some uniform factories as well as heavy aircraft. So let's start with a heavy aircraft. That would be that one. And we're going to end the episode here. I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank you for liking the videos if you would. I do appreciate that. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for many more great Hearts of Iron videos. And love hearing from you. So post questions, comments, suggestions, ideas. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.